There is a reason the name Osiris echoes through the oldest corridors of civilization, a reason his story has survived floods, fires, and the silent revisions of empires. Long before the rise of Christianity, long before the burning of the Great Library, long before doctrine replaced mystery, Osiris represented something far more dangerous than a myth. He represented a technology of the soul, a blueprint for immortality. And for thousands of years, that blueprint has been carved into temples, whispered in initiation chambers, and hidden in the very symbols we walk past every day. But you were never meant to understand its true meaning. Not fully, not clearly, not in a way that could empower you. Tonight, we are stepping into the forbidden space between religion and myth, between symbolism and truth. Because the story of Osiris, his death, dismemberment, resurrection, and ascension, is not a legend. It is a manual, a map of consciousness so potent that later institutions had no choice but to bury it beneath the sands of heresy. Ask yourself this: why does nearly every religion on earth share the same structure? A dying God, a resurrecting Savior, a promise of eternal life. Why does Osiris appear centuries before them all? And why do ancient Egyptian texts describe the path to immortality in step-by-step metaphysical instructions, while later traditions insist that immortality is something you receive, not something you activate? In this video, we will uncover what the church feared people might realize: that Osiris was not just a god. He was an archetype of the awakened human. His myth is a manual for transforming consciousness, dissolving the false self, and accessing a state of being that does not decay, does not die, and cannot be controlled. We will explore the hidden history the world rarely speaks of, the symbolic language of resurrection, the forbidden teachings of the ancient mystery schools, and finally we will bring it all back to you: how these ancient secrets can be applied now, in the quiet rituals of your daily life. This is not entertainment. This is initiation. To understand Osiris, you must first understand the world that shaped him, a world far older, far more advanced in spiritual science than most modern histories are willing to admit. Ancient Egypt did not see itself as a civilization of mortals. It saw itself as a bridge between the physical and the eternal. Everything, from the alignment of temples to the geometry of their writing, served one purpose: to preserve, awaken, and elevate consciousness. And at the center of this spiritual empire stood Osiris, not merely as a deity, but as the prototype of the perfected human soul. His story is one of the oldest known resurrection narratives. Long before scripture spoke of salvation, the Egyptians were documenting the phases of inner transformation through myth. The tale begins with the murder of Osiris by his brother Set, an act symbolizing the shattering of the unified self, what some esoteric traditions call the fall into fragmentation. Set dismembers Osiris into 14 pieces, scattering them across the land. This is not a tale of gore. It is a description of the human condition. The soul, once whole, becomes divided between ego and essence, desire and duty, impulse and intuition. Isis, the devoted consort of Osiris, represents the intuitive force within every human, the inner wisdom that seeks to gather the scattered parts and restore coherence. She travels the land, collecting the pieces, reassembling them through sacred rites. And when Osiris is restored, he is not simply returned to life. He is elevated. He becomes Wennefer, the perfected one, the immortal king of the afterlife. What later religions translated as a literal resurrection was originally a profound metaphor for spiritual rebirth. To the Egyptians, immortality was not a reward. It was a state of consciousness attained through inner alchemy, through the unification of the fragmented self. So why did later institutions obscure this meaning? Because a person who knows that divinity is an inner process becomes impossible to control. A human who understands that immortality is awakened, not granted, no longer depends on intermediaries, authorities, or doctrines. In the ancient world, this knowledge was preserved through the mystery schools, where initiates underwent symbolic death rituals, psychological purification, and meditative practices designed to transform their perception. The death of Osiris was a rite performed on themselves. The resurrection of Osiris was the rising of their own higher consciousness. But as empires shifted, the guardians of spiritual knowledge changed. When political religion took hold, whether Roman or early Christian, the idea of self-generated immortality became dangerous. It threatened the hierarchy. It undermined the need for salvation through external figures. So the myth of Osiris was reframed as pagan folklore, stripped of its metaphysical instructions, its symbolism dismissed as superstition. Yet the ancient texts remain. The pyramid texts, the Book of the Dead, the coffin texts, all whisper the same message: awaken the Osiris within. To the Egyptians, Osiris was not a distant god to worship. He was the blueprint of what you could become. To uncover the forbidden secrets of Osiris, we must shift from history into the symbolic architecture of the myth itself. Because the Egyptians didn't teach through sermons, they taught through symbols, stories, and metaphors designed to bypass the logical mind and speak directly to the subconscious. The myth of Osiris is one of the clearest examples of this spiritual coding. Let's begin with his death. Set, the brother who murders Osiris, is not simply a villain. In the mystery traditions, Set represents the force of separation, the aspect of human consciousness that fractures unity into multiplicity. The ego, the shadow, the restless impulse to divide, categorize, and isolate. This is the part of the psyche that claims, I am separate from everything else. I am alone. In the Egyptian worldview, this fragmentation is the root of all suffering. When Set kills Osiris and scatters his body across Egypt, the myth is describing what happens psychologically the moment we enter physical existence. The unified soul becomes splintered across different aspects of identity: personality traits, social roles, emotional wounds, desires, fears, and forgotten memories. We become a collection of pieces that, forgotten, they belong to the same whole. This is the first secret. Osiris does not die in a story. He dies in you. Every human being experiences the shattering of inner unity. Now enter Isis. Isis is more than a wife or goddess of magic. She is the archetype of the restorative principle within every human, the intelligence that seeks wholeness. In psychological terms, she is the inner healer, the intuitive force that senses what has been lost and knows how to recover it. In mystical terms, she is the divine feminine, the hidden wisdom that patiently gathers the pieces of the self. Her journey across Egypt, searching for the parts of Osiris, is not a mythic quest. It's a metaphor for introspection, shadow work, and the quiet, often painful process of reclaiming the parts of ourselves we abandoned. Every buried memory, every suppressed emotion, every forgotten dream is a fragment of Osiris waiting to be found. This leads to the second secret. Resurrection is not about coming back from physical death. It is the return to inner coherence. When Isis reassembles Osiris, she performs what the mystery schools called the Great Work, the alchemical unification of the self. But even after she brings him back, something extraordinary happens. Osiris does not return to his old life. He does not reclaim his throne. He becomes something greater, the ruler of the Duat, the invisible world. This reveals the third secret. The awakened self does not fit back into the old life. Once consciousness ascends, it cannot return to its previous limitations. Osiris becomes immortal, not because a god revived him, but because fragmentation has no claim on him anymore. He is whole, integrated, complete. And integration is the birthplace of immortality. To the Egyptians, immortality was a state where consciousness no longer identified with the temporary body, the temporary emotions, or the temporary identity. It was freedom from the cycles of psychological death and rebirth we experience every day. But here is where the secrecy begins. If immortality is achieved through inner unification, then salvation is not an external gift. It is an inner science. And the moment you understand this, you no longer need a priest, temple, institution, or mediator. You carry the temple within you. You perform the rites within your own mind. And this presented a problem for the systems that came after Egypt. Systems built not on inner mastery, but on centralized authority. So the meaning of Osiris was dismantled, piece by piece, just like his mythic body. His teachings were scattered through revision, suppression, and distortion. The myth was reduced to folklore. The mystery schools were dissolved, and the philosophy of resurrection as psychological integration was replaced with the doctrine of resurrection as a reward for obedience. But the symbols remain, and the symbols still speak. To truly grasp the forbidden teachings of Osiris, we must now descend into the hidden layers, the aspects of the myth that were intentionally veiled, encoded, or misunderstood by later traditions. Because the story of Osiris is not linear. It is cyclical. It repeats within every human being, generation after generation, consciousness after consciousness. Let us begin with the most misunderstood element of all. The resurrection of Osiris is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new form of existence. When Osiris becomes the ruler of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, he does not become a ghost or shade. The Duat is not a place of punishment or reward. It is a dimension of consciousness, a realm of pure awareness that exists beneath the surface of ordinary perception. In esoteric teachings, the Duat is described as the inner world, the domain where the soul meets its unfiltered truth. Thus, Osiris becomes the archetype of the awakened consciousness that governs the unseen aspects of the self: intuition, memory, imagination, dreams, spiritual insight, and the deep subconscious. This is why he is called Lord of the Silent Ones. Not because he rules the dead, but because he presides over the silent, hidden layers of reality that most people never learn to access. This reveals a forgotten truth. Immortality is awareness that pierces through the illusions of physical identity. It is continuity of consciousness. But the myth goes deeper. The child of Osiris and Isis, Horus, represents the reborn self, the fully awakened consciousness now acting within the world. Horus is not just a son. He is the next version of you. He is the future that emerges when you recover and integrate the fragments of your inner Osiris. In the mystery schools, initiates were taught that the spiritual journey has 3 phases. 1. Osiris, the fragmented self. The parts of you that have been scattered through trauma, conditioning, and forgetting. 2. Isis, the restorer. The intuitive force that gathers your scattered pieces and reassembles your identity. 3. Horus, the awakened self. The version of you that rises after inner resurrection, capable of seeing the world with clarity, acting with purpose, and living with power. This trinity, Osiris, Isis, Horus, was the original blueprint for spiritual evolution. A blueprint later echoed in holy families, divine trinities, and resurrection myths across cultures. But the Egyptians expressed it without dogma, without punishment, without fear. It was not a moral system. It was a psychological one. Now we reach the most controversial teaching of all, one almost completely erased from later interpretations. Osiris is not resurrected by divine intervention. He is resurrected through knowledge. The Egyptians called this knowledge Heka, a word that has been mistranslated as magic, but which actually means the creative power of consciousness. Heka was the force that shaped reality, not through superstition but through directed awareness, disciplined intention, and mastery of the inner world. In other words, the Egyptians believed the mind itself was a divine tool capable of bending reality. To awaken the Osiris within was to awaken one's Heka, to reclaim the power to shape one's destiny. This is why later institutions buried these teachings, because a population who believes salvation comes from within cannot be governed through fear. A population who understands that immortality is achieved through consciousness becomes unmanipulable. A human who knows they have access to divine power no longer depends on external authority. And so the myth of Osiris was reinterpreted as primitive religion, stripped of its metaphysical sophistication. The symbols, once maps of the inner journey, were dismissed as decoration. And the true meaning of immortality was buried beneath centuries of literalism. But the truth endures in the same silence that Osiris rules. The resurrection of Osiris is the resurrection of your awareness. The birth of Horus is the birth of your higher self. And immortality is not a promise. It is a state you must awaken. Ancient wisdom is never meant to stay trapped in myth. The Egyptians understood that a truth becomes powerful only when it is lived, breathed, and embodied. So the question becomes, how can the story of Osiris move from symbol to experience? How can you awaken this archetype within yourself and step onto the path the mystery schools guarded for millennia? The first stage is the gathering of your inner fragments, the quiet work that mirrors Isis wandering the land in search of Osiris's scattered pieces. Set's dismemberment of Osiris symbolizes how, throughout life, you abandon certain parts of yourself. A forgotten dream, a silenced emotion, a boundary you failed to uphold. Each becomes a fragment lost to the desert of your unconscious. To begin the inner restoration, sit in stillness at the end of each day and ask which part of you left behind. It might be a moment you swallowed your truth, a feeling you refused to acknowledge, or a desire you quickly dismissed. Naming the abandoned part is the first act of remembrance. It is how Isis finds the pieces. But finding the pieces is only half the ritual. To reassemble them, you must bring each forgotten aspect back into the warmth of your awareness. The Egyptians called this the restoration of life, not by erasing the wound, but by allowing it to be seen without judgment. Choose one fragment from your inner landscape and sit with it without trying to modify or solve it. Feel the emotional texture of it. Notice the places it touches in your body. Breathe gently into the discomfort and speak silently to it. I see you. I accept you. You belong with me. This is the ancient work of integration. It is Isis breathing vitality back into Osiris, piece by piece, until the self becomes whole again. Once a degree of inner unity is restored, the process of resurrection begins. In Egyptian terms, this is when Osiris becomes Wennefer, the perfected one. In modern terms, resurrection is the shift from identifying with the fragmented personality to identifying with the awareness observing your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. The practice is simple but transformative. Once each day, step back mentally and watch your thoughts as if they are passing clouds. Observe them without reacting, as though they belong to someone else. Over time, a profound realization dawns. Your thoughts are not you. Your emotions are not you. Even your identity is not fixed. It is a mask worn by something deeper. That deeper presence, the silent witness behind your experiences, is the beginning of immortality in the Egyptian sense. It does not age, it does not decay, and it exists before and beyond the body. With this awakening comes the emergence of Horus, the new self born from resurrection. In the myth, Horus rises to act in the world with clarity and purpose, unburdened by the distortions of fragmentation. You experience this phase each time you make decisions from awareness instead of fear. Fear is set. Reactivity is set. Every moment where you pause, breathe, and act from grounded consciousness rather than instinct is a moment where Horus lives through you. This is what it means to walk as an awakened being, not to escape the world, but to move through it with a level of perception untouched by chaos. These practices may seem modern, but they are ancient at their core. They reflect the same inner rituals performed in candlelit chambers of the mystery schools, the same psychological alchemy encoded into temple carvings, the same spiritual science the Egyptians believed was the key to transcending death. The myth of Osiris is more than a story etched into temple walls or preserved in fragments of ancient papyrus. It is a mirror, one held up to the human soul for thousands of years. And the more deeply you look into it, the more you realize that the myth has never been about gods living in some distant, unreachable realm. It has always been about you, about the parts of you that have died, the parts of you that have been forgotten, the parts of you that are waiting patiently to be reborn. The Egyptians never intended these teachings to be taken literally. They encoded them in symbols because symbols outlive civilizations. Empires fall, languages change, but a symbol, once awakened in the mind, continues to reveal itself through every age. Osiris is one such symbol, an eternal reminder that fragmentation is not the end of your story. Buried beneath the noise of daily life lies a deeper continuity, a consciousness that cannot be scattered, broken, or destroyed. When later traditions buried the inner meaning of the Osiris myth, they buried the idea that human beings hold the keys to their own transformation. They replaced an inner resurrection with an external promise. But the ancient Egyptians understood something far more empowering. Immortality is not bestowed. It is achieved. It is earned through awareness, integration, and a return to inner unity. And now, centuries later, that forbidden knowledge resurfaces, not as dogma, but as remembrance. You are Osiris in the moments when you feel lost, fragmented, or disconnected. You are Isis when you begin the slow, compassionate work of reclaiming what has been abandoned. And you are Horus when you rise with new clarity and walk through the world with a consciousness that sees beyond illusion. As you carry these teachings with you, remember this: resurrection is not an event. It is a practice, a way of living, a continuous unfolding of awareness. And each time you choose to awaken rather than remain asleep, you take one step closer to the immortality the ancient world spoke of, the immortality the church buried but never truly destroyed. If this exploration stirred something in you, share your thoughts, your experiences, or your questions in the comments. And if you're ready to dive deeper into the hidden knowledge of ancient wisdom, make sure to subscribe. The journey is far from over.